Okay, now that you've seen the flow chart, I think you have sort of a broad overview of what we're going to do. And here is our specimen. It's moving very slowly, so we're going to be able to look at all the features and determine what we have here. So here is our euthanized specimen. It is now moving very slowly. And now let's take a look at all these different parts. So when we're looking at the key, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the siphon. And we're going to try and describe that siphon according to the steps in the key. So the first step in the key asks us to look at the siphon and determine whether or not it is very sharp, like for piercing plant tissue, or if it is blunt, or if it is long and cylindrical. So looking at this critter here, I can say that it's long, but it's not really cylindrical. It kind of is a little bit bulbous. I like to say it's kind of blunt. So that is a characteristic that lets us know, okay, we can keep going. This is potentially one of the medically important genera. There we go. Okay, the next thing we have to do is we have to look at some very specific features on that site. Now we're going to try and look at some of the characteristic attributes, morphological features on that siphon to tell us what we have. So I am going to focus in just a little bit. Look at that. Wow. There we go. Okay. So what you're going to find when you're looking under the microscope and looking for these features, you're going to find that you're going to have to manipulate your specimen just a little bit because they're three-dimensional, and your camera on your phone and your microscope are providing sort of a two-dimensional image. And so sometimes you can't see everything the way that it is oriented. So I'm going to show you right here. The first thing that I can show you, I'm looking for pectin, but in this orientation, I don't see it. But on the left of the siphon, you're going to see some hairs coming out. Okay, and it's multiple hairs. There is one hair, and then there's a tuft of hairs, which you can call setae if you want. There's another hair right there. So there's at least 3 or 4 hairs. There's another hair towards the base there. And we also can see, I'm sorry, he's moving just a little bit too fast. And then you'll see right next to that siphon, laying kind of on top of it, you'll see what we call the saddle. And then there's some clear things sticking out of that, and those are the anal gills. So you can see all these things here, but in order to continue with our identification, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to roll this guy over a little bit and see if we can get a view where we can see the pectin. Okay, so we have now focused in a little bit, and I am honestly, I'll just tell you, I'm having a little bit of trouble finding the pectin. One of the reasons why is that this is a very, very dark siphon. And usually we will be able to see it because it will refract light a little bit differently. If you can get it to lay on its side, you can actually see it as a small row of almost like regular teeth-like structures. So that's really different than these hairs that we see on the siphon, which are not regularly spaced. There, you've got a siphon, and you've got, a setae here and a single one here, and so on and so forth. But the way that the light is bouncing off of the siphon, right in the middle there, I am pretty sure that is pectin. And so, for the purpose of this observation, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure. So I'm going to call that pectin, and maybe we can find another example of pectin later. But what we see, which is absolutely beautifully displayed in this view here, are the things called the comb scales. And you'll see those right at the top of the siphon. There is a row of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You can see 7 of them. There's probably, I don't know, 11 or 12 or something of those guys, but you can see them really clearly. Of course, now let's get it really clear. Yeah, there. And so looking at the comb scales, the amount of comb scales, and the shape of the comb scales is another feature that we're going to look at in our key. So here you can see there's a single row of comb scales, and they come to a point. Let's now talk about the saddle. The saddle is sort of the big, almost squarish thing you see in this picture. It's right above the siphon. And it's a little bit darker because it's a little bit, it's the tissue there is just a little bit thicker and harder. And you'll see that the siphon is not completely circling the end of the segment. What you'll see is that the saddle there is about halfway around. And if you sort of think of that like an upside down horse, you'll see that you're sitting at the bottom of the saddle there. And then the top part is the bottom of the saddle. Okay, that doesn't really sound like it's very good description, but anyway, you have to use your imagination. But anyway, if this went completely around the terminal segment there, you wouldn't see a little bit of that white tissue there. Instead, it would be that darker stuff going all the way across. And if you flipped it over, it wouldn't go all the way around. So what we have here is a saddle that partially encircles. It is not pierced by hairs. It is just there. And what we do is we see a series of hairs there underneath the saddle, but it is either above or below. In this case, it's below, but not piercing the saddle, and the saddle does not go around. So already we have a pretty good idea of what this specimen is. All right. Okay, I was able to flip everything over, and now I'm able to show you the feature that we were looking for, which is the pecten. Now I want you to compare this with the hairs that you see. Do you see the hairs that are at the top of the siphon there? That is a tuft of hairs. You see over here, there's two setae, a couple hairs here. There's some hairs that are coming off underneath the saddle here. And then we have a big clump of hairs here. We call this the ventral brush. So remember these things because we're going to talk about, these when we are, okay, this is a close-up now of our siphon, and I want you to think about the hairs you just saw, and then I want you to focus in on that little row of sharp, spiky protrusions that we see on the left-hand side of the siphon. Those are the pecten. Now, you have to kind of work a little bit to get it to the side view so you can see it very clearly. But also, if you are looking at the siphon and you see kind of like a pattern of light that is refracting, that shows that there's little bumps on the siphon, you can sort of take that as indication that that's probably 80%, 90% chance that it is pecten. And so if you can't really quite see it, I would encourage you to continue going on in the key. And then if you see all the other features, you're going to be safe in making your determination. But that is what the pecten look like, and that is a really good view. So here we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 protrusions. You can see there are usually at least that many. Sometimes they're more. Sometimes they go along the entire length of the siphon. Okay, that is great. What a good picture. All right. And then here, whoops, here we go. And now I wanted to show you, here we go. So now we are focusing our attention above you can see the pecten on the edge of the siphon there. But what I want to call your attention to now is the terminal anal segment, which we can also call the tail. And what you see there is the saddle. And when I first showed you the saddle, I said that you can, what you want to determine is whether or not it goes all the way around that tail section, that anal segment, or whether or not it goes partially around. Here you can see that you have a sort of a dark black, almost boxy thing, and then above that you have lighter tissue. The dark boxy thing is actually the saddle. The lighter tissue is the anal segment. And so we can tell from this picture that there is that this is a saddle that only partially goes around the anal segment, and that there is the ventral brush, which is a big clump of hairs, and that clump of hairs does not pierce the saddle, but instead it's found underneath it. So these are all features that we can use to identify the specimen. And finally, if I can just move this over carefully. There we go. Okay, back there. You can see in this line up here too, is that you can see very clearly those comb scales that we identified earlier. Here they are located right above the siphon again, but they are, you can only see a few of them because of the way that the way that this is oriented. But you can see that these particular guys, they come to a point. There we go. All right, good. Okay, there's one more thing that I'm going to look at now, just to make sure, because this is such a nice specimen to look at. And one of the things that we're going to look at a little bit later, and I'm just going to show it to you now, is when we're testing for what kind of Aedes species we have, we're going to look at the hairs that are found, alongside the abdomen. And so here you'll see the little clumps of hairs, or setae, that you find on each of the anal segments. And what you will see here is that there doesn't appear to be anything dark, like a hook or anything like that. It looks like the hairs are just sprouting directly out like that. Okay, perfect. All right, I'm ready to go to the key, and we can now begin to go through that flowchart we saw, and we can identify our specimens. And I wish I could do this by showing you two things at the same time and comparing and contrasting. That's difficult, but this is one of the cool things about the Mosquito Habitat Mapper dichotomous key, because it provides you pictures at every step. And so when you look at the pictures, just remember what you just saw, and